Mark never thought college life would put him in the same room as an alien. When he first saw her standing in the doorway of their shared dorm, carrying a small black case and looking unsure of where to sit, he almost forgot to breathe. She wasn't like the aliens from movies, no tentacles, no green skin. Kaylee was tall, slim, and her skin had a soft silver glow that seemed to catch the light and bend it. Her eyes were wide, deep pools of shining amber, and when she spoke, her voice was soft and careful, as if every word might be too heavy for human ears. At first, Mark was nervous. Sharing a room was already a challenge for humans. Throw another species into the mix and who knew what might happen. But Kaylee was nothing like the warnings whispered in the cafeteria. Some students claimed her people were dangerous, ruled by instinct more than reason. Others said they couldn't be trusted, that their wild season turned them into something primal. Mark never asked her about it. He didn't want to believe the gossip. Weeks passed and the two settled into a rhythm. Kaylee studied late into the night, her long fingers tracing alien script across glowing tablets. Mark often stayed up too, scribbling math notes on paper, sometimes catching her curious glance as if she couldn't understand why he preferred messy ink to neat light. They shared snacks, laughed at each other's clumsy translations, and occasionally played music, her strange stringed instrument filling the room with sounds like wind over water. Slowly, Mark realized he didn't just see her as a roommate. She was his friend. That's why her warning hit him so hard. It was a Thursday evening and the sun outside was bleeding orange across the campus towers. Mark was setting his books aside when Kaylee closed her tablet and looked at him with a seriousness he hadn't seen before. She drew a long breath and her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "Mark," she said, her voice low and unsteady. "I must tell you something important. Tonight it begins for me." Mark blinked, confused. "Tonight what begins? Midterms? Please tell me you're not making me study again." But she didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. Her glowing eyes locked on him, filled with something heavy. Fear. "My wild season," she whispered. "Every cycle, once a year, my people fall into it. It lasts only one night, but that night is dangerous." Mark felt a small chill crawl across his arms. He remembered the rumors now, the stories students shared in hushed tones. He tried to push them away, but Kaylee's expression didn't let him. "Dangerous how?" he asked carefully. Kaylee pressed her palms together as if steadying herself. "During the season, we lose control. All feelings grow too strong, hunger, anger, fear, even need. It is like fire in the blood. We are told to isolate, to restrain until morning comes." She looked down, ashamed. "It is not who I wish to be, but I cannot stop it. You must keep away from me tonight." Mark opened his mouth, then shut it again. He could see how much it hurt her just to admit this. She had always been calm, graceful, gentle. To imagine her losing control felt impossible, yet the tremble in her voice was real, the sadness in her eyes undeniable. "You're saying you'll lock yourself in? Like tie yourself up?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Yes, I have restraints. I will chain myself and I will not speak. It is safest this way." Then she looked at him, pleading. "Promise me, Mark. No matter what you hear, no matter what you feel, you will not come close. Do not open the door. Do not touch me, please." Mark felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say it didn't matter, that she could handle it, that he wasn't afraid. But the truth was he was afraid. Not of her, but for her. Afraid of what it cost her to live with something like this, alone and in shame. He forced a smile, trying to lighten the air. "Don't worry. I'll respect your wild season rules. I'll just put on headphones and binge old Earth movies until it's over." But Kaylee didn't look reassured. She stared at him, her eyes shimmering like a storm barely held back. "I am serious," she said, her voice breaking. "If I hurt you, I would never forgive myself." The weight in her words sank deep into him. Mark had always thought of himself as ordinary, average, nothing special. But now he saw that to Kaylee, his safety meant everything, and maybe, just maybe, that made him more important than he realized. He nodded firmly, even though his chest felt heavy. "I promise, Kaylee. You won't lose me tonight." Kaylee turned away, hiding her face, but he thought he heard a whisper escape her lips. It sounded almost like a prayer. And as the sun disappeared and the first shadows crept into their small dorm room, Mark realized this wasn't just another night. Something was coming, something neither of them were truly ready for. Night fell with a restless sky. Thick black clouds rolled over the campus and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. The students in the dorms closed their curtains, switched on their lamps, and tried to ignore the storm outside. But inside room 412, the real storm was about to begin. Mark sat on his bed, pretending to read. The pages of his book blurred in the dim light, his mind unable to focus. On the other side of the room, Kaylee was preparing. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone walking into a battle she knew she could not win. From the bottom of her black case, she pulled out long metal chains. They looked heavy, almost too heavy for her slim arms, but she handled them with grim familiarity. The sound of links clinking against each other filled the room, sharp and cold. She also had a strange harness made of leather and glowing locks, clearly not human design. Mark wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Each sound of the chains being tightened felt like a strike in his chest. He hated seeing her like this. She was his friend, someone who laughed at his bad jokes, someone who shared her world with him. And now she was binding herself like a prisoner. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked quietly. Kaylee didn't look at him. She was strapping the harness across her chest, her silver skin glowing faintly in the stormlight. "It is the only way," she replied, her voice flat but trembling underneath. "I must not be free when the fire comes." Mark swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another solution. But one look at her determined face stopped him. She had been through this before, many times. She knew what she was talking about. When she finished, Kaylee sat down on the floor, her wrists and ankles locked in place. She closed her eyes and whispered something in her language, soft and haunting. It sounded like a prayer or maybe a farewell. The storm outside grew louder. Rain hammered against the window and thunder shook the glass. The lights flickered, casting the room into sudden shadows. Mark pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders. He had promised not to interfere. He had promised to stay back. But the fear pressing into his chest told him that promise might be harder to keep than he thought. For a long time there was silence, broken only by the storm. Kaylee breathed steadily, her head bowed, her body tense. Mark tried to distract himself. He put on his headphones, opened his laptop, and played an old Earth movie. The sound of laughter and music filled his ears, but his eyes kept drifting to her. Then it began. At first it was a low sound, a growl, almost too soft to notice. Then came the rattling of chains. Kaylee's body jerked, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her silver skin brightened, pulsing like light trapped underwater. Mark froze, his movie forgotten. "Kaylee?" he whispered. Her head snapped up, and for a moment lightning lit the room. Her amber eyes glowed like molten fire. They were no longer the soft, gentle eyes of his friend. They burned with hunger, with wildness, with something ancient and uncontrollable. "Stay away," she hissed, her voice layered with something deeper, something inhuman. Mark's heart pounded, but he stayed where he was. He wanted to reach out, but he remembered her warning. "No matter what happens, do not come close." She pulled against the chains, the metal groaning under her strength. Her body trembled as if fighting itself, every muscle straining. The harness glowed faintly, locks holding for now. Outside, thunder roared. Inside, Kaylee roared louder. The lights flickered again and then went out. Total darkness swallowed the room. Mark's breath caught. The only light now came from Kaylee herself. Her silver skin glowing in pulses, her eyes blazing in the blackness. The chains rattled violently. The sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air. "Mark," she gasped, her voice breaking through the growl for a second. "Don't look. Don't listen." But he couldn't look away. And then it happened. With a sharp crack, one of the chains snapped. The broken link flew across the room, clattering against the floor. Mark's stomach dropped. Kaylee was free, at least partly. Her arms stretched outward, claws scraping against the wall. She screamed, half in rage, half in pain, and thunder answered her cry outside. Mark gripped his blanket tighter, every instinct screaming to run, but his promise chained him as surely as her broken restraints had chained her. He had told her he wouldn't leave. And now the real night had begun. Lightning flashed across the campus sky, and for a heartbeat the entire room lit up. In that brief white glow, Mark saw Kaylee standing half-bound, her chest heaving, her skin glowing brighter than ever. One chain still held her legs, but her right arm was free, clawed fingers scraping long lines into the wall. The sight was terrifying and heartbreaking. Her eyes locked on him, burning like molten fire. She wasn't the calm Kaylee who laughed at his clumsy translations. She wasn't the gentle Kaylee who played strange music late at night. This Kaylee was something raw, something wild, caught between who she was and what her instincts demanded. "Stay away," she shouted, though her voice cracked, more a plea than a command. Mark's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to throw open the door and get as far from her as possible. But something in her trembling voice froze him in place. She didn't want to hurt him. She wanted to protect him from herself. That thought struck deeper than fear ever could. Her body shook violently, as if she was battling invisible chains inside her own mind. Her breath came in ragged bursts, her eyes flickering between wildfire and desperate sorrow. She pulled at the remaining chains and the metal groaned, bending under her strength. Mark's throat was dry, but he forced words out. "Kaylee, it's me. I'm still here." Her head jerked toward him, and for a terrifying second she lunged. Her free arm slammed against the wall near his side of the room, leaving deep claw marks in the plaster. Mark stumbled back, his spine pressed against the wooden desk, breath caught in his chest. Her face was inches away, her glowing eyes filled with pain and hunger. But then she froze. Her claws hovered at his throat, so close he could feel the air tremble between them. Her entire body shook, her chest heaving as if she was holding back a storm. Her teeth bared, not in anger, but in the desperate effort to restrain herself. Tears welled in her burning eyes. "I don't want to hurt you." The words were torn from her, raw and broken, as if they were the last fragile pieces of her true self fighting to stay alive. Mark's fear didn't vanish, but it twisted into something else. Resolve. He had never seen anyone fight themselves so hard. He had never seen pain like this. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand, his fingers trembling, and touched her wrist. "You won't," he whispered, "because I believe in you." For a moment, the room went silent except for the storm outside. Kaylee stared at him, her expression torn apart by conflict. The wildness in her eyes flickered, dimmed, then flared again. She jerked her arm back, smashing her claw into the floor to stop herself from striking him. The tiles cracked under the blow. She let out a guttural cry and staggered backward, pulling against the remaining restraints until she collapsed onto the floor. Her body shook as if electricity was running through her veins. Mark sank to his knees, still shaking himself. He wanted to run, to scream, to lock the door from the outside. But looking at her, curled on the ground, trembling, fighting her own nature, he couldn't. His fear was still there, but stronger than fear was the ache in his chest. She wasn't a monster. She was Kaylee, his friend, fighting to hold herself together. The storm outside rattled the window panes. The room smelled of metal and sweat and rain. Mark took a deep breath and sat closer, though not too close. "Talk to me," he said softly. "If you can hear me, hold on to my voice." Kaylee's head lifted slowly, her glowing eyes filled with struggle. "Your voice. It cuts through," she whispered, her words trembling. "But the fire, it burns everything." "Then let me burn with you," Mark replied, surprising even himself. His voice cracked, but the words were steady. "You're not alone in this." For the first time that night, Kaylee's growl softened. She pressed her forehead against the cold floor, fighting the storm inside her chest. Her claws clenched so tightly they left marks in her palms, glowing blood seeping from the cuts. Yet she didn't attack. She didn't break. And Mark stayed. The chains weren't the only things breaking that night. Something deeper was shattering. Fear, shame, the silence between them. For Kaylee, it was the first time someone hadn't abandoned her in the wild season. For Mark, it was the first time he discovered how far human courage could stretch. The storm roared on, outside and inside, but one fragile human voice kept calling her back from the edge. And somehow, against all odds, she listened. The storm outside raged without mercy. Rain slammed against the window, thunder shook the glass, and the wind screamed as though the sky itself was in pain. But none of it compared to the storm raging inside the small dorm room. Kaylee's body writhed on the floor, her silver skin glowing and pulsing with every frantic heartbeat. Her chains rattled, strained, and bent as if they were made of nothing more than paper. Her voice came in broken cries, sometimes a growl, sometimes a sob. She was no longer in control. Her instincts had taken her into a battlefield where she fought herself with every breath. Mark sat only a few feet away, frozen, but determined. His legs shook, his hands trembled, but his eyes never left her. He had promised he wouldn't abandon her, and that promise anchored him even as fear tried to drag him away. "Kaylee," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm though his heart raced. "It's me. You know me, Mark, don't let go. Hold on to that." For a moment, her wild amber eyes snapped to him. Lightning flashed across her face, showing the battle inside. Her lips curled back, her claws dug into the floor, and her voice came out as a roar. "You shouldn't be here." The words were raw, shredded by pain, but they were still her words. Mark clung to that even as her voice made the air shake. "I told you," he said, his throat dry but his voice steady. "I'm not leaving. Not tonight. Not ever when you need me." Kaylee slammed her head back against the wall, her chains screaming as she pulled. Her whole body twisted, fighting against the instincts that begged her to lunge, to tear, to release the fire burning in her blood. Her breath came in ragged gasps and tears cut bright trails down her glowing cheeks. Mark couldn't stand just watching her suffer. He moved closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough for her to hear every word clearly. "Remember the first night we studied together? You laughed at my handwriting. You said it looked like broken star maps." Her body jerked and a strangled sound left her throat. She wasn't laughing now, but her eyes flickered with memory. "Yes," Mark pressed on, voice firm now. "And that time you played your instrument and I said it sounded like a sad river? You smiled at me, Kaylee. You remember that, don't you? That's you. That's who you are, not this. Not the fire. You." Kaylee's claws scraped the floor, carving deep scars into the tile. She lifted her head slowly, eyes blazing but trembling. "It hurts. It hurts so much," she whispered, her voice broken like glass. Mark's chest ached. He wanted to hold her, to pull her out of the fire with his bare hands, but he knew he couldn't. All he could give her was his voice, his presence, his stubborn human refusal to let her drown in herself. "I know," he said softly, "but you're not alone in it anymore." Suddenly she lunged again. The chains jerked, one nearly snapping, and her body slammed against the floor only inches from him. Her claws stopped just short of his arm, trembling violently as if her own muscles betrayed her. She let out a cry, half scream, half sob, her tears falling hot onto the ground. Mark flinched but didn't move away. Slowly, carefully, he reached forward and placed his hand on the floor, close enough for her to feel but not close enough to provoke her. "You're stronger than this," he said. "Stronger than the fire. Stronger than the storm. I believe that." Her entire body shuddered. Her claws dug deeper into the floor instead of into him. Her jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might break. The growls in her throat softened, cracked, and turned into a low, pained whimper. And then for the first time that night she lowered her head instead of fighting him. Mark exhaled shakily. He knew this wasn't over. The storm inside her was still raging, still burning, but something had shifted. She hadn't broken free completely. She hadn't attacked him. She had chosen, even for a second, to fight for control instead of surrendering to the wildness. And that small choice felt like a victory. The storm outside howled louder, thunder shaking the walls, but Mark kept speaking, his voice steady, soft, relentless. If the fire inside her was endless, then so too would be his words, because Kaylee wasn't just fighting herself anymore. She had him, and he wasn't going anywhere. The night dragged on, every minute stretched like an hour. The storm outside had lost none of its fury, but inside the room the storm within Kaylee was far worse. Her chains had cracked again. One more snap and they would fall completely apart. The harness that once looked unbreakable now hung loose, glowing locks flickering weakly. She crouched low on the floor, her breath ragged, her claws leaving long scars across the tiles. Her glowing skin pulsed like lightning trapped under her veins. Mark sat only a few feet away, bruises already on his arms from where she had struck the wall too close to him earlier. He was exhausted, his throat raw from speaking, his body tense from fear. But his eyes never left her. He refused to let her go through this alone. Kaylee lifted her head suddenly. Her eyes were pure fire now, no trace of the gentle girl who once laughed at his Earth stories. Her voice came out harsh, almost not her own. "Leave me, Mark. Before it's too late." Her words cut him deeply, but he shook his head, his voice steady despite the fear crawling in his chest. "No, I told you I wouldn't. I don't break promises." Her body shook violently. She pulled against the last chain, and the metal bent like it was nothing. With a terrible sound, it snapped. She was free. Mark's stomach dropped. For the first time that night, nothing held her back. No restraints, no locks, no chains. She was unbound, and he was the only thing in her path. Kaylee staggered forward, every step heavy, trembling, dangerous. Her claws gleamed in the faint glow of her skin. Her breathing was shallow, as if she was fighting herself with each movement. She stood only inches away now, her shadow falling over him. Mark didn't move. His body screamed to run, but he stayed. His voice came out low, steady. "If you want to hurt me, then do it. If that's what the fire wants, then take me. But I know you, Kaylee. I know the real you is still in there. Her claws rose high above his shoulder. For one terrifying moment, Mark thought it was over. He could almost feel the sharp edge against his skin. But then he saw her face, twisted not with rage but with unbearable grief. Tears ran down her glowing cheeks as she froze, trembling, her hand refusing to strike. I can't, she choked, her voice broken. I can't do this to you. Mark felt his chest tighten. He slowly raised his bruised hands and placed them gently on her arms, grounding her, steadying her. Then don't, he whispered. Don't fight this alone. Let me fight with you. Her whole body shook violently as if she was about to split in half. She let out a scream that tore through the room. A sound of pain so raw it made the storm outside seem quiet. She dropped to her knees, claws digging into the ground instead of into him. The tiles shattered under her strength. Mark dropped with her, his knees hitting the broken floor. He placed his hands on her shoulders, holding her as she convulsed as the wildness inside her tried to drag her under. You're stronger than this, Kaylee. You hear me? You're stronger than the fire. She lifted her head, eyes blazing, teeth bared, tears streaming down. It's easier if you hate me, she whispered, broken. If you fear me. That's what humans should do. That's what everyone does. Mark shook his head, his voice fierce now. No, not me. Humans don't abandon their friends. We don't run when it's hard, we stay. Even when it hurts, her body shook again, her strength slamming into the floor, the walls, even into him. His arms ached from holding her, bruises spreading, but he didn't let go. Finally, her growls softened into sobs. Her claws lowered, pressing against the ground, no longer raised to strike. Her head bowed under the weight of exhaustion. Mark's arms trembled as he kept holding her, whispering again and again, You're not alone. You're not alone. The wildfire inside her hadn't gone out yet, but something had changed. For the first time, it wasn't dragging her away, it was meeting resistance. Not just from her, but from him. And together they held the line. The hours crawled like centuries. Outside, the storm still roared, but inside the small dorm room, time felt even heavier. The walls bore scars from Kaylee's claws. The floor cracked beneath her strength, and the faint smell of metal and ozone hung in the air. Mark was exhausted. His arms ached. His throat was dry from speaking, and his body was bruised where Kaylee had nearly struck him. But he refused to leave her side. He sat on the floor across from her, his eyes locked on hers, holding her in place not with chains but with words, with the stubborn fire of his human spirit. Kaylee's strength was fading. Her glowing skin dimmed with each passing hour, though her eyes still burned. She curled against the wall, her body trembling as if cold, though sweat dripped from her forehead. Every breath sounded like a battle. I can't, she whispered, voice breaking. The fire is endless. It doesn't stop. I don't know who I am anymore. Mark leaned closer, his voice steady despite the fear still in his chest. You're Kaylee, the one who laughed at my handwriting. The one who plays music that makes me feel like I'm standing by a river. The one who always makes space for me, even when the room is too small. That's who you are, not this fire. Her lips trembled. For a moment her fiery eyes softened, then flared again. She clawed at the wall, leaving deep grooves, but didn't move toward him. She was fighting herself still, but she was also listening. Mark sat beside her now, slowly, carefully. He kept his hands open, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel he was near. His voice dropped low, almost like a lullaby. You don't have to win this fight tonight. You just have to survive it. Let me be here. Let me carry part of it with you. Kaylee let out a sharp cry, her body jerking as though the fire inside lashed at her. She slammed her hand against the floor, cracking the tile again, but instead of lunging at him, she leaned her forehead against her knees, shivering. Why? She whispered. Why stay when it hurts you too? Mark closed his eyes, gathering every bit of courage left in him. Because that's what friends do. We don't run when it's hard. We don't leave when it gets ugly. We stay even if it hurts. That's what makes us human. That's what makes me. Me. Her breathing slowed a little. The glow of her skin dimmed further, her fire still alive but no longer blinding. She leaned sideways, almost collapsing against the wall. For the first time since the night began, she didn't resist his presence. Mark reached into the pile of blankets on his bed, pulled one free, and carefully draped it over her trembling shoulders. She stiffened for a moment at the touch, then slowly relaxed, clutching the fabric as though it was an anchor. Thunder cracked outside, shaking the room. Kaylee flinched, but Mark stayed calm. It's just the storm, he whispered. It will pass. They always pass. She turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes dim but wet with tears. "And if I don't pass?" "You will," Mark answered without hesitation. "Because I'm not letting go." Silence settled over them for a while, broken only by the storm outside. Kaylee's breathing remained heavy but steadier. The wild growls had faded into soft, broken sounds like a wounded animal finally allowed to rest. Mark leaned his back against the wall, his own body aching with exhaustion. His eyelids burned with tiredness, but he kept them open. He wouldn't risk sleeping, not while she was still caught in the fire. His voice was soft, constant, even when she didn't respond. He told her stories of his home, of Earth's oceans, of his childhood dog who used to wait by the window for him to return. Simple, small things, but real things. Pieces of a human life she could hold on to. At one point, Kaylee whispered, her voice fragile. "Your words. They keep me here, like ropes in the dark." Mark's chest tightened. He wanted to cry from the weight of it, but he only nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Then I'll keep talking. All night if I have to." As dawn crept closer, Kaylee's fire dimmed to a faint glow like embers dying after a storm. She leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, the blanket still wrapped around her. And for the first time in hours, her body stopped trembling. Mark sat beside her, utterly drained, but with a quiet sense of victory. He hadn't saved her. He couldn't, but he had stayed, and somehow staying was enough. The longest night was ending. When morning finally came, it did not arrive with gentle light but with a slow gray sky. The storm outside had passed, leaving the campus soaked and quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the smell of water and earth. Inside the dorm room, the silence was heavier. The floor was broken in places. Claw marks stretched across the walls, and pieces of chain lay scattered like fallen bones. The chaos of the night was written everywhere, but at the center of the wreckage, two figures remained. One human, one alien. Mark sat against the wall, his head leaning back, eyes half closed. He was drained beyond words. His arms were bruised, his shirt torn, and his throat ached from hours of speaking, but his gaze was fixed on Kaylee. She lay curled on the floor, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. The glow of her skin had faded to a faint shimmer, like starlight dimmed by distance. Her breaths were slow, deep, calm. The fire had gone. For a long time, Mark didn't move. He just sat there watching as the heavy truth sank in. He had survived the night. And more importantly, so had she. Kaylee stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The golden fire that had once burned there was gone, replaced by the soft amber glow he knew so well. She blinked slowly, confusion in her face, then sorrow as she noticed the broken room around her. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "Did I?" She couldn't finish the question. Mark shook his head gently. "No, you didn't." Her lips trembled and she sat up slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders. She looked at her hands, claws dulled, stained faintly with her own glowing blood. Shame crossed her face. "You should have left," she whispered. "Everyone always leaves." Mark let out a weak laugh, though his eyes were damp. "Yeah, well, I'm not everyone." Kaylee's breath caught. She stared at him for a long time, as if seeing him for the first time. Her eyes shimmered, not with fire this time, but with tears. "No one has ever stayed," she whispered. "Not even my own people. I was always told to fight the fire alone." Mark pushed himself forward, ignoring the pain in his arms. He sat beside her on the broken floor. Then they were wrong. No one should fight alone. For a moment, Kaylee didn't move. Then slowly she leaned against him. Her head rested on his shoulder, her body still trembling but no longer from fire, only from the memory of it. Mark froze, surprised by the weight of her trust, then carefully wrapped the blanket around both of them. "You're still here," she murmured, as if testing the truth with her own voice. "Still here," Mark replied softly. "And I'll be here tomorrow too. And the day after. As long as you want me." The silence stretched, but it was no longer heavy. It was gentle now, filled with the soft rhythm of morning. Kaylee closed her eyes, her voice fragile but certain. "Mark, you are more than human. You are anchor. You hold me when I am breaking." Mark swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Maybe that's just what being human means," he said quietly. "We hold on even when it's hard." The room was still ruined. The scars of the night would not vanish easily, on the walls, on the floor, on their bodies. But within the wreckage, something stronger had been built. Trust, a bond that had survived fire and storm. Kaylee lifted her head, her amber eyes soft. "When my season comes again, Will you stay? Mark didn't even hesitate. He smiled faintly, tired but true. Of course. You don't get rid of me that easily. For the first time since the night began, Kaylee laughed. A small, broken laugh, but real. The sound filled the room more brightly than any sunlight. And as the morning grew stronger, as light finally broke through the gray clouds outside, they sat together in the ruins of their night. Kaylee had thought her wild season was a curse no one could endure. Mark had thought he was just an ordinary human. But together, they had discovered a truth greater than fear, greater than fire. Humanity isn't the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful, but humanity is the one that stays.